Hello guys and welcome to another stream on the WorldWideChels channel. It's your host Matt back again and I am joined by the wonderful co-hosts Carlito and Jess. How are you guys doing?
Oh man, this is a big window. It's a stressful window. It's one that Chelsea absolutely has to get right, considering the last two windows, although spending record amount of money, we more or less got it wrong. We were more or less haphazard and messy and jumbled and chaotic. And normally Chelsea fans love that because we can kind of find measure and grace in the chaos, but this time we absolutely did not. So this is a big window, Matt, and I'm a little apprehensive.
Yes, definitely. It's a window we're all going to be keeping eyes peeled and seeing how Chelsea recover from what's been a terrible season. Jess, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Thank you for Ben. Thank you to Ben for being here, for giving us his time. And as a transfer enthusiast, I am. I like this period, but as a Chelsea fan, I'm kind of worried as well. We have a lot to do with the club, and it's going to be great to talk to Ben about it.
Yes, well, and we do. As Jess has kindly said, we do have the wonderful Ben Jacobs on the channel to answer some important questions. Ben, how are you doing? And thank you for giving us your time.
Yeah, always a pleasure. I've been promising I'd come back on for quite some time, so pleased we've finally found the time to have a chat.
Well,
yes, definitely.
Well, as everybody knows, we consider Ben to be the best journalist in European football. I'm not slating other journalists, but Ben is patient. Ben is not going to commit to something just to be first. He'd rather be right. And the fact that he prioritizes that is something that we appreciate. That's why we always go to him. That's why if there's transfer news, we'll go to Ben and we'll go to David Ornstein, and I'll say, okay, these are the two guys that we really trust. And Ben is the best. So if you don't mind, Ben, love to get into it with the first question being something around Chelsea's reputation. Now, this in particular concerns the club Brighton. All right. I'm looking at the situation and I'm saying if Levi Colwill played for Brighton would ask for $80 million for Levi Colwill. Okay. Because they've asked for a ton of money from Marco Correa. They're going to ask for a lot of money from Moises Caicedo, someone that you told us to be very keen on and pay attention to for the past year. And, now they're asking for Levi Colwill and they're asking for 40 mil. Okay. Now that we would consider that a low ball offer. My question to you is this: has Chelsea lost the gravitas, okay, to speak softly, but carry a very big stick in the market when it comes to negotiating during transfer windows? Because it feels like Chelsea is always being asked to pay premium prices. And yet when other clubs come for our players, they're always trying to lowball and negotiate down prices with us. It's Chelsea that has to pay the big money, but they don't get the money in reciprocation. Now, am I wrong on this, Ben, or am I reading too much into this? And do I just feel like the last year has been sour grapes? Or has Chelsea really lost a little bit of negotiating power?
I wouldn't say lost negotiating power. It's just the reality of the model. And Chelsea have been so bullish about trying to get the targets, especially in January. And there's always going to be an impact on the industry. And I always say one thing, which is look at every transfer collectively, either because budget means a club wants more than one player. So they have to factor in not just the player and the fee, but what might be left. And also what you've done previously in the market affects your reputation, positive and negative. So if Chelsea spend big, then naturally everybody looks at that and they realize two things. One is that if Chelsea return to the table, they've set yardsticks that clubs then use against Chelsea, which is normal in negotiation. And the other thing is, of course, if everyone feels that Chelsea need to sell, either financially speaking or to get their squad size down, they're going to come in with lower ball offers because there's a feeling that maybe they can get Chelsea to drive down fees rather than hanging on to players and keeping the squad size too big. And one of the most underrated points to look out for in this window is outgoings are not easy. So Chelsea have got 3 windows worth of outgoings to do in one window. And anyone that thinks that 12 odd players, if we're including senior players and those on the peripheral of the squad as well, are just going to walk out in an orderly procession in the space of the next 3 weeks, they don't understand how a transfer window works, because some of the players are on high wages, some might not want to leave, some might not have the right offer from another club, lots of different factors at play. So this isn't clubs screwing Chelsea over. This is the reality of Chelsea's model. And for all of the celebration over Enzo Fernandez or Mykhailo Mudryk, and for all of the criticism at the time from the Arsenal fan base over Mudryk, for example, Arsenal have a different model and they stick to it. And why do they stick to it? So when they go in for Declan Rice now, they can keep the deal at what they perceive to be reasonable. So there will be effectively a Chelsea tax. People are going to try their luck because they've seen what Chelsea have spent in the past. But Chelsea may still have the last laugh in all of this, because if they genuinely believe it's worth going for a player like Mudryk or Enzo Fernandez or Caicedo, even if they do end up paying above the odds, it's because they see the transfer fee as an investment, not an expense. And this is a second underrated point that people should understand. What you pay is not always the final amount, and what you pay is arguably quite irrelevant as long as you can balance the books, as long as the player's a success. So everything still comes down to your quality of scouting. And if you overpay now, sure, people will say the player's not worth it. But how do you know? They've not even played a single game at this point for Chelsea Football Club if they sign them. And if in 5 years' time, the recruitment team are right in their hunch that it's worth that number, even if it seems inflated, then the transfer fee becomes an investment, not an expense. And maybe also you're paying more on the transfer fee, but less on the wage. From an accounting point of view, you're amortizing, so it doesn't have as big an impact annually on the books. So it's far more complex than just hearing a number and saying that's way too big. And yes, Chelsea are in a different position now because their model is to move early, to jump ahead of the market, to be bullish, to buy young, and maybe at times overpay on youth. But overpaying on youth now might not be overpaying on youth in the future because they can grow into the price tag.
Go ahead, Jess.
Thank you. My question, Ben, is it's in relation to who's doing the negotiating in Chelsea, because obviously in the previous administration, we kind of knew who was leading the negotiations, and after the takeover, we saw Todd Bowley, we saw Eghbali really involved in it, especially with Mudryk, with Enzo. And I see now, especially on Twitter, people talking about certain members of the board as if they really know who they who is doing what, who is leading the negotiations, and just a lot of criticism to certain people. And I'm not sure if there's any basis to that. I also have a doubt because as far as I remember, in terms of the initial reports, when Stewart came in Chelsea, he was linked with the multi-club model, and then Winstanley obviously came in with Potter and the identifying talent, and now both of them are co-sporting directors. And my question is, as Chelsea fans, what we need to be looking out for? Who is going to be leading the negotiations in the transfer market? How much are the likes of Todd Bowley, maybe Vivell, or even Eghbali going to be involved?
Well, first of all, let's just bust a myth about Christopher Vivell, because from what
Thank you
finds it very funny that everything that happens, manager search, transfer search, Chris Vivell is leading on it. He's the star of the show, and he's a member of the senior leadership team, but he's certainly not running the show. So there's two sporting directors, Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley, and they are leading the recruitment side in terms of targets, and they're working in effectively a transfer committee. So we shouldn't see this as one person. It depends what the target is. Are they one for now? Are they one for the future? Are they young? Are they old? Is there another person at the football club that has a pre-existing relationship with them? But everything is feeding up from a decision-making perspective in terms of targets to the co-sporting directors, which is very normal. But because there is a transfer committee, there is a debate between a variety of people to get to the decision. And then if necessary, it can still feed up to Bedag Eghbali and Todd Bowley and others on the board, by the way, as well. And I think that this is very similar in terms of the volume of people to how Liverpool work. And when you have a transfer committee, you shouldn't get obsessed with one specific name, because that's not how a transfer committee works. It's about a freedom to challenge, and the dynamic is way more important than any title. which is why for one transfer, it might be one team that goes and tries and gets a player of 2 or 3 senior leadership members. And for another transfer, another couple. And of course, that's normal, because unless you're putting intermediaries everywhere, which was a bit more the Abramovich approach, then you need people to be hands-on. So if we're talking targets, then the starting point is always going to be Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley. Negotiation is a little bit different, because once you've established the target, how you get the deal over the line is a different skill set. And this is where we've seen Todd Boehly and Behdad Eghbali more involved. But by that point, the target's been selected. So you have to, again, segment here between how are they debating who they go for and how are they actually negotiating the deal. And as soon as you're negotiating the deal, of course, the ownership group, and in particular, Behdad Eghbali, because Todd Boehly may step back a little bit, may be more heavily involved in the negotiations. And we saw that with Mykhailo Mudryk. And why? Because Behdad Eghbali represents the majority owner. So Clearlake Capital are still across all of the numbers. And whether they think that a massive investment for Enzo Fernandez or Mykhailo Mudryk is worth it. But that doesn't mean that they're sitting there picking the targets. And I would also add into the mix as well, Jose Feliciano, who we almost never hear about, but is also on the board at Clearlake Capital and is highly influential at the football club as well. And I think everyone likes to focus on Boehly and how he's somehow the face of the football club. And I think that's normal, because we went through a period where he did everything seemingly. He was interim sporting director, he was chairman, but it's a team effort. And in a team effort, if you don't have debate, if you don't almost have a healthy, positive, constructive disagreement, then it means that everyone is a yes man or a yes woman. And then it becomes irrelevant because someone at the top is just autonomous, and that isn't healthy. So you would actually expect some transfers to be pushed by some names and others to be pushed by others. And you would expect the ownership group to come in more significantly once a clear target has been established, because actually Chelsea have got the benefit of the fact that their owners are very hands-on, they're very business orientated, they're very experienced in closing deals. So if they know the deal they've got to close, why not involve them? And then the last myth that I want to bust is around Pochettino, because Mauricio Pochettino is a part of this model, but he's got the job because he buys into the model. So when people said, Poch wants Agate, Poch is pushing for Agate, before, by the way, he's even legally started in the role. Pochettino loves this player, Pochettino loves that player. Well, of course, the manager has a say, and that's normal. And Pochettino wouldn't have taken the job if what he wanted wasn't considered. So when he says he wants proven Premier League quality, guess what? Moises Caicedo gets bumped up the list and so on. But that doesn't mean that just because he arrived or is about to arrive formally, that suddenly Agate was a target. That shows a profound misunderstanding of how the model works. Pochettino's a part within the model, but you, as Liverpool do, have a model that survives managerial changes, not to take power away from the manager, but to protect the football club. Otherwise, every single manager that comes in, you're going to change your approach. And Abramovich did this. And because he was cutthroat and because Chelsea won trophies, he got away with it. And everyone thought every time there was a managerial change, somehow Chelsea were better, which was true in fairness. And quite clearly, this is why Chelsea fans thinking about football enjoyed Abramovich and the model, because he won 21 trophies. But take the trophies away, which is great for the players that won them and it's great for the fan base, but then only look at the players that became surplus under different managers, that became square pegs in round holes under different managers. Take those players. How many Chelsea players had their careers stifled, set back by being at Chelsea because they were signed under one manager and then they were not the right fit? Far too many. And the approach now is to be more consistent and get longevity over recruitments. The manager has to buy into the model rather than the model buying into the manager. So therefore, if Agate was tried for, he was tried for because Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley had allocated him and chosen to go early, long before they knew who the manager was. So they'll ask the manager his opinion. If the manager, for any reason, can make a compelling argument to change their mind, of course, it will be considered. But this idea that Poch can come in overnight and suddenly trigger Agate or save Mason Mount, it's an aspect of what a manager does. But the truth about a manager during the transfer window, which I think is also very key, is that they have their say later in a window, believe it or not. As a new manager anyway, it's completely different if you're like a Jurgen Klopp or a Mikel Arteta, because it's much more fluid. But if you're Pochettino, you come in, you respect the strategy, you see what they're working on, you let them sort out the outgoings, and of course you input the outgoings because you're seeing the players day on day. Once Pochettino gets into pre-season, and particularly in the last month of the window, after competitive games have been played, that's where Pochettino is going to push more. Why? Because he's actually seen what he's got to work with. So Pochettino can make that more compelling argument to the senior leadership team, because he's saying, guys, we were moving in this direction based on your plan, but look at the first 3 games of the season, or look at the pre-season. It's obvious because we've got an injury, because we still lack goals, because we have lost more players than we've been able to bring in, and we've actually now got a hole in a certain position, etc., etc., etc. This is where Pochettino can say, I'm showing you practically what we're lacking. And that's when they'll listen to his football experience, and that's when they'll understand what he's building. So he's in a much stronger position to input when he's been in for longer. Whereas now, from afar, if Pochettino just said tomorrow, I'm not even in yet, but I'm on the phone to you and I'd like you to sign Ivan Toney, even though he's got a betting ban, and I don't care that you've got Lautaro Martinez or somebody else lined up. I'm just throwing general names out here. I don't care who you're going for. It's Toney or nothing. I'm putting my foot down. They would say no.
Hey, Ben, you might call that a gamble.
You might call that a gamble indeed. I'm hesitant to make jokes about gambling because he declared he had a gambling addiction, but I take your point.
No, it's, and look, and yeah, that wasn't Jess, but in all seriousness, no, I hear your frustration about the myths and what the misconceptions about the window and who's really in charge and all that stuff. So I do appreciate that. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes. First of all, before I get to my question, big up to Sharanath, who's done the £5.50 Canadian dollar super chat. He says, big up, Ben. Facts over myths. Big up to the panel for having such a session. WorldWideChels, the best Chelsea media in YouTube. Keep the blue flag flying high. Thank you, Serena, for tuning in and making the super chat. So, Ben, my question to you, obviously, the early transfer window for Chelsea was completely taken over by the Agate transfer. 1 minute, it seemed like Chelsea were getting him. It looked like it was going to go through. It was all steady, smooth sailing. But just as Chelsea transfers go, it's never so simple. PSG seemingly come in with another bid. Suddenly he's going to PSG. And what I found is a lot of different journalists were saying a lot of different things, whether it was Agate getting 200k a week all of a sudden, or other fees coming in, questions over the whole investment into Sporting Lisbon by Chelsea and PSG not liking that. My question to you, Ben, is what now it's all settled down, it looks like a guy has gone, signed, dealed and delivered. What was the reason Agate didn't move to Chelsea and preferred PSG?
Well, I think there's 2 sides to this as part of the narrative, if you like. Side number 1 is the PSG position, which is Chelsea tried to create a preferable structure to Sporting and put pressure, therefore, on Sporting to recommend Chelsea to Agate, and PSG were unhappy with that. They wrote a legal letter, which was, of course, ran by L'Equipe, and suddenly, that evening, after the story came out, Chelsea pulled out. And that's PSG's perspective. Chelsea's perspective is PSG just offered a much higher package and they were not prepared to match the value of that package. And as a consequence of that, they decided to walk away. So this is significant because we don't really know yet between the 2 clubs whether or not the PSG side is right or the Chelsea side is right. All we know, which is the cleanest thing for Sporting and Chelsea to say, all we know is that Chelsea pulled out because they were not prepared to offer the same kind of wage as PSG. But PSG are adamant that their wage was not that high. So I think this is one that's been rewritten in hindsight, if I'm honest with you, because Sporting or Chelsea are never going to acknowledge they discussed investment. And Chelsea, by the way, and we need to make this clear, deny categorically that there was any kind of there was any kind of wrongdoing, if you like. Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm actually getting a bunch of Havertz style messages. So apologies.
Oh, no. This is a live show. It's all good, man. This is part of your job, right? Anything you can directly report?
I'm coming to it in a moment.
I love it, man. I love it.
Talk amongst yourselves.
No. It's all good. No, and this is something that I actually thought, go ahead, Ben, do your thing, but I'll talk with Jess and Matt about this. It almost seemed to me like whatever Chelsea was or was not trying to do, right, with Sporting, I think that PSG leaked it to maybe tell on them, get them in trouble, maybe ruin the deal with Ugarte. And I mean, that's my perspective on it, is that it felt to me like this was an intentional leak.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a bit of understanding that obviously the Ziyech deal in January did not go down well at all between PSG and Chelsea. Again, who was in the right, who was in the wrong about that, we don't know and probably won't fully know. The suspicion it was more Chelsea's wrongdoing than PSG. But I do think there is that aspect of, there is that kind of, PSG do want to bully us and give us almost a little bit of psychological payback and that sort of thing. Kind of almost how Barcelona were last season. Of every time we were almost close to a player, it seemed Barcelona would pull another lever, come in and snip the deal. I feel like PSG maybe held their cards back a little bit and then made it a bit more public just to stun Chelsea out of a deal, which to PSG looks like it worked, and it makes PSG have come out of this looking smiley and roses, and Chelsea have had to do a bit more damage control, which hopefully, fingers crossed, will be sorted out by another centre midfielder that's from Brighton, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, guys, put in your questions and we'll talk about it while Ben is checking out his news.
By the way, I'm so fascinated that he got a news break midstream. This is the best. I absolutely love this. Oh my gosh. It's like when Ian Rappaport is on Pat McAfee's show and then he gets a tray and he's like, McAfee, give me a second. I got to tweet this. I'm sure Ben is just ferociously moving his little fingers on that phone, man. Oh, that's so awesome.
We should almost just have a breaking news kind of thing at the bottom going.
You
across.
want a detente? Or, like I think it's called a chyron or something, right? Like it's a thing that goes on the bottom, a chyron scroll. Oh my gosh, that is
so
kind
of like how Sky Sports do. They just do that kind of breaking news, do, and then announce the news.
And we break into Sky Cave with another report.
I'll be back with you guys shortly.
No worries, Ben. Take the time.
I didn't hear him. What did he say?
He said we'll be back with us.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I don't do this. This is his job. Just take your time, buddy. No, this is just so hilarious. But I do want to talk to you both about this because he's going to come back on in a second, and this is going to be about Havertz. I got to ask, and Jess, I'll start with you. Do we really want to do this? Arsenal? Because what if he bangs for Arteta? What if all of a sudden he's playing next to Martin Odegaard and behind the striker, and he's in his natural position, and he looks incredible? And we've just strengthened a team that's already better than us. I have a problem with that.
I have like two sides. So I always analyze it from a fan's perspective, like the subjective side, but I also try to analyze it objectively. So subjectively, and this is a controversial take, I think, because I actually really like Kai. And so I think he's a really good player. I know it's 3 years, but I just think the quality is there. So it's just my personal take on him. And I wouldn't like to see him playing for a rival. I would much rather, if he was, if we are going to sell him, I would much rather for us to sell him abroad, obviously, either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich and whatever. But looking at it objectively, if Arsenal is the is the club that wants to pay what we want. He's been here for 3 years, and he scored one of the most important goals, in my opinion, in our history in the final of the UCL, obviously. But he hasn't really worked. Like, nobody knows exactly what his best position is. People say it's behind the striker, but then we have Christopher Nkunku coming in. We need to trim the squad. So, and at the same time, if I'm talking objectively, I never have a problem with selling to rivals unless you don't adequately replace the player. So let's say everybody knows about Kovacic and Manchester City, right? So if you're telling me, oh, we're going to sell him because it's the end of the contract, because he wants a new challenge, the player wants to move, we can get a fee for him, but then we're going to go out and get, I'm going to be stupid here, okay? I'm just not even bringing Moises Caicedo in, but like, we're going to get Tchouameni or Camavinga or Valverde or whoever, then that's fine. The problem is if you start selling all of these players and then you replace them with worse players, at least from my perspective. So selling Kai to Arsenal wouldn't be my first choice, but if we have a plan in place and if we are targeting players that will suit our squad better, I would have no problem with it.
Hey, he's back. And I saw your live tweets, Ben. This is a trip. I'm just going to admit it right now. This is a trip, my man. I'm loving this so much. What was it? Was it Mason Mount news?
Mount and Havertz news, in fact. So
what's going on with Kai?
Let's do the Mount news first, because that's a formal bid. And the formal bid from Manchester United was only 40 million and has been dismissed out of hand by Chelsea. So it took them very little time to reject that bid. And we expect this, I think. Remember, Manchester United are thinking of Mount for under 60 million, and they want him quite close to 50 million, if at all possible. So 40 million is low, even from Manchester United's perspective. But it just shows you that the Chelsea valuation is not going to be met there. With Havertz, my understanding is that there is a slightly more positive dialogue taking place, because the price of Mount, Chelsea are going to be quite bullish on, I sense. And whether or not eventually they'll sell, it's a long window. We have to wait and see. I think everyone looks at Mount as sell or renew, but there's a chance that Mount falls in love with the Pochettino project and they try and hang on to him for a little bit longer, which is essentially what Daniel Levy is going to try and do with Harry Kane. So I think that's important, because the situation with Mount is a bit more fluid, because Chelsea are desperate to keep him. The situation with Havertz is that the player's open to the Arsenal move, and by the way, Real Madrid as well. But Real Madrid are not going to be paying big money, and Mbappe now we know might be available on the market as well. So Real Madrid are thinking 50 million euros. You might see 50 million pounds. I'm told with Real Madrid it's 50 million euros. Chelsea's valuation of Kai Havertz is 75 million. And that is very high. But unlike Mount, I sense that they will come down quite significantly on that, maybe to 55 or 60 million pounds, which is too high for Real Madrid. Let's see whether Arsenal think that that price is too high. But whereas with Mount, the bid was dismissed pretty much instantly. With Havertz, my understanding is that talks will be ongoing. They're early, but they're ongoing. And that there's a bit more of a feeling in the Arsenal camp that there is a deal to be had there, and that there might be something lower than 75 million, but still competitive, that is worth all parties' whiles. So Chelsea's perspective with Mount is that there's really four options. You sell him, you get him to renew, you don't get him to renew, but you keep him at the football club and then take the risk of losing him on a free, or you get him to renew, but on a shorter term deal to buy yourself time. And within those four options, my understanding is that Mount will not want a 1 year deal to buy anyone time. He's not going to be doing Chelsea that luxury. So then you're left with the other three options. And we wait and see whether Pochettino actually says, listen, if Mount's not adamant that he wants to leave, if Mount doesn't turn around and say, I just want out, maybe you do have to run the contract down a little bit and see where you are in January. So that one's a bit more difficult, I think, because from Manchester United's point of view, as soon as it gets above 55, 60 million, they're gone from that race. And obviously, even if Chelsea budge on price, to go from 70, 75 to 50, big drop. So nothing is guaranteed there, but Manchester United are pushing and trying and advancing and seeing whether they can agree something. But I reported this one weeks back, 15 to 20 million between the valuation of Manchester United and Chelsea. And that's still the case. And they've even come in lower, and Chelsea have dismissed that. With Havertz, it's a bit different. I think a bit like when Jorginho went, a bit like if, as expected, Kovacic goes to Manchester City, Chelsea will be a little bit more accommodating, I would say.
So I got this question because a new major player has come into the international football system, not just football, but sports in general. You just saw this with Live Golf and the PGA. If anyone thinks that the PGA bought out Live Golf, that is false. This is now a partnership, and they'll create a new league under the auspices of Live Golf being their greatest sponsor, but it is a partnership. And I'm looking at Saudi Arabian money and their new influence on sports, in particular with this conversation, football. What is the end game here with this? Because from my perspective, they're looking to interject their money, create a positive PR move for them. They want to be involved in big sport, and they want to be involved in a positive way. And I won't get into the politics of it, but my question is very simple. What is the end game here? Because I'm looking at players like Lukaku, who we could actually sell. We could actually get serious money for if he goes to the Saudi Arabian League. And I'm just wondering, is the end game for them to actually be a top 6 league? Because right now there's basically a big 5. Do they want to be a top 6? Or will they eventually say, okay, I think we've done enough, and they'll move on to something else? Or is this a long-term investment in football?
I think it's a long-term investment in football. And
really?
I think that's the overarching plan. I mean, why would you think it's not?
I don't know because I think they want to try their hands in a lot of different sports. I foresee them trying to buy an NFL team. I foresee them trying to buy an NBA team. I don't just think this is going to be strictly a football thing or a golf thing. I think this could be much more global and much more much less regionalistic. So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, is there no stopping this? And is the toothpaste out of the tube?
I think the plan is basically to have a vision, and the vision is tied into the World Cup in 2030, but it goes beyond that as well. It's about bringing sport to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East more broadly, even if they do have partners such as the UAE in the future. But for now, it's very Saudi-centric. It's about making sure that they generate jobs and income away from oil and gas. And it's also about making sure that they get stars to help promote their bid for the 2030 World Cup. And in addition to that, there's an aspect to all of this, which is sports washing, if we put proper scrutiny on it. So if you ask Saudi Arabia, it's a vision, and that vision is very positive and forward-looking, and it's about developing their region using sport. But it's also always going to be used as a soft tool for power as well. And as a journalist, you'd be very naive to only report on the vision and the positivity and not reference the fact that sport can be used as a soft tool of power to help rewrite history as well. So if the past is negative in many ways, but the future is positive, it's very easy to only get caught up on the positivity. But we have to be abundantly clear too that there's a negative aspect that is being rewritten, because everyone loves Ronaldo and everybody loves Karim Benzema and so on. But I think when you only look at the league, it's a little bit different, because these clubs are not funding much. The money's coming from the government, the money's coming from commercial partners. It's all the same deal makers. So the beauty for the clubs is that they're not paying for the asset, but they're benefiting from the asset. And as a consequence, they can use a lot of the money and the income, because they're not at a loss by signing these players, to grow their league, improve the standard, grow their visibility, and also with money brought in, improve their facilities as well. So if everything goes according to plan, then the league could develop, but we still have to understand what the strategy is, not this year, not next year, not the year after, but in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, because we've seen this before with the Chinese Super League, where money's come in, players have moved, it hasn't worked. Then if you talk to FIFPro with stars that have already joined in Saudi Arabia, guess what? Problems, disputes over wages, unpaid bills. So it's all very well getting excited about the direction of travel and then looking at things like live golf, and boxing's come to Saudi Arabia. Golf is very big in the Middle East and North Africa. And you can quite clearly see that money talks. And over time, if money continues to talk, then obviously a strong league will develop. And who's to say that the top 5 leagues have to always be the same? And who's to say that Europe has to be the focus of global football? Because eventually every footballer is going to go where the highest standard is, where the best competitions are, and where the money are. So can you manufacture that over 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Theoretically, yes, with the right amount of money and the right amount of law. But Saudi Arabia is not for everybody. And as Messi showed, the money is not for every top player either, because they're rich as is. So I think there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. And we have to be very careful about presuming the direction of travel. But let's see if they can get their first 20 names in, then stabilize the league, then grow its global appeal, because from there they'll have slightly stronger foundations than the Chinese Super League. The other thing as well is that Saudi Arabia are not as intent about local quotas. So with the Chinese Super League, it went from being able to sign stars to pivoting and going back towards every team having to play, I think off the top of my head, it was 8 local Chinese-born players. And that makes a big difference, because if you're always going to have a predominant team of homegrown talent, it means it's going to be very difficult to get all the best players over in the world. I think if Saudi Arabia could get 500 of the world's best players in their league and distribute them equally, that's exactly what they do. And as a consequence of that, it means that they can be more ambitious, because they're more inclined to grow the league than necessarily keep the league entirely Saudi-centric. Yeah,
so we'll have one quick question from each of from Jess and from Matt, and then we'll get you out of here and we'll ask for listener questions. Again, Ben, you are the absolute best. Go ahead, Jess.
Thank you so much. Again, time for some, I think, myth busting, because I think it's important for the fans, for the regular fan, to be able to really interpret certain reports. So we see a lot of rumors about Chelsea having to sell because of FFP. And I was just wondering if you could maybe explain that a little bit, if that is true, and whether or not, if it is true, if Chelsea needs to sell, does it come directly from FFP, or just simply because, especially because we see a lot of Chelsea need to sell before buying their targets. That's a line that I saw a lot. Is that because of FFP, or if true, or is that simply because of the squad numbers that Chelsea already do have, and they don't want to even inflate it even more? So it would be safer to just sell first and then acquire those targets.
Yeah, I think one of the key things about financial fair play is just that where Chelsea end up will be very contingent on the new model and new numbers. So a lot of what we're basing the projections on as to just how tight it is are from the Abramovich era. And in a year or a cycle, if the multi-club model brings in a different kind of income, if shirt sponsors add income, if generally the business runs differently, then the numbers will change. So that's really important to stress, because obviously if it's tight, then every little bit of income helps. But generally, Chelsea are looking for outgoings because they need outgoings. They're not looking for outgoings because they urgently need the money. And the Manuel Ugarte saga shows you that they got rid of their, I suppose, major spend in the last 2 windows. That's true. So it's not going to be 300 million every single window going forwards. That's not sustainable, especially without Champions League football. But that's not to say they can't sign 1 or 2 without selling, because why otherwise would they have been able to get to the point of saying, here's 60 odd million euros for Manuel Ugarte? They've obviously got that 60 million euros if they need to. So this isn't a sell before they can buy. It's a sell because they need to get the squad size down. And it's a sell because every time you sell, if there's no amortization left on that player leaving, it's pure profit on the annual books. So you can be creative from an accountancy point of view, and every single outgoing can offset 3 or 4 amortized incomings in terms of on the annual books. The worry with amortization over a long period of time is effectively just that it accumulates and it lingers. So it might not seem like a lot, 6 million for this player annually, but if it's times 7 years, times 8 years, and suddenly you get 4 of them, 5 of them, 6 of them, 7 of them, then it means that each year to offset that, you keep needing to get 40, 50, 60 million, and that's just to break even. So it becomes problematic over time. But Chelsea are not sweating financial fair play as much as you might think. They'll sweat financial fair play if they don't get straight back in the Champions League next season. They'll sweat financial fair play if they don't get some of the fees that they're planning for. But there's too many players out there that Chelsea can get healthy fees for, whether that's Christian Pulisic, whether that's a slightly smaller fee for someone like Kovacic, whether that is in the end Mason Mount, whether that's Kai Havertz, whether that's Conor Gallagher. There's too many players out there that Chelsea can get fees for to bide time, financially speaking, on the books in the short term. So this preference on outgoings is not because they need them to bring someone in. That's counterproductive. If every time they had an outgoing, they went, great, we can make an incoming, then the squad size isn't going to go down. The preference on outgoings is because Chelsea know that even if they had Kylian Mbappe, Lionel Messi, and whoever else you want to add in the list, it would make the blindest bit of difference unless the manager has a manageable squad size and picks a consistent 11. So no one incoming, even if people think it's going to be dramatic. Everyone says to me, Caicedo, that would make the difference. Or sign Victor Osimhen, of course, a fantastic signing. But none of this would make the blindest bit of difference to the personality of Chelsea, the chemistry of Chelsea, the functionality of Chelsea, the unity within the squad, if the vast majority of the squad feel that there's too much competition. So outgoings help financially, but far more important is just get the general senior squad size number down. Otherwise, Chelsea are in big trouble.
Do you have time for one more question, or you got to go, Ben?
One quick one, but then I go.
Yeah, so it's quite a quick one. Update, obviously we've mentioned Caicedo very briefly, but any updates on Caicedo currently? Obviously there's a rumour that Manchester United may be involved and more of a threat than Arsenal. Is that true, or is that something that's a bit off?
The Caicedo links are big and genuine, and I think that Arsenal will also be in this conversation as well. It's very normal because they're the two clubs that were involved in January. I don't think Rice precludes Caicedo for Arsenal, but I think that Chelsea are going to be there and relatively intent on trying to get this one over the line. The Brighton perspective is that even though they'll never put a price tag on at this point and they'll be hoping for a bidding war, it's going to take a minimum of 70 million euros plus 10 million in bonuses to start that conversation. So it's a massive fee. I'd still be surprised if Caicedo leaves and is a £100 million player. I think that it's a total package of around 80 million. That is my feeling. And the less suitors, the better from Chelsea's perspective, because the last thing they want to do is get sucked into any kind of bidding war. So this one's going to take a little bit of time, I sense, because Arsenal have been focused on Rice. They're still trying to get that one over the line quickly. Brighton have been focused on both finding replacements, but also selling Alexis McAllister. So they've not been in a hurry. And then the agent of Caicedo lives in Dubai and hasn't flown over for anything advanced or dramatic at this point. So I think everyone accepts that this has to be done on Brighton's timescale. Just because Caicedo signed a new deal, it doesn't in any way prevent a move. There's very much an understanding there that Caicedo can still leave this summer. So it's all just going to be about, again, who sees value in Caicedo. And for example, Manchester United keep getting linked and they're not in the mix at the moment at all. And we still hear some other links like Liverpool. They think the value is too high. So we have to be very careful here because there's a lot of games at play, and Brighton are going to try and get the highest possible price, but it's not like January where Brighton are going to be dismissing out of hand. What Brighton are going to be doing is they are going to be working with the suitors to help Caicedo get a move, because this is what has been almost, I wouldn't quite say promised, but it's been guaranteed to Caicedo that Brighton will not be so greedy as to price him out the market. And that's why I think that we're looking at 75 or 80 million and not 100 million. And I expect Chelsea to be there. And it's going to be about the structure of the deal, because Chelsea are not going to want to drop 70 million up front. They're also not going to be leveraging Colwell in any deal. The Chelsea position on Levi Colwell is not for sale. So when you consider all of that, Brighton will try their luck if it's Chelsea. They'll either be saying, Arsenal bid 70, you got to go above that. Or they'll be saying, sure, you can have him for 75 or 70, but we want Colwell and you can pay less cash up front. And Chelsea are going to be saying no chance. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think in the end, it's going to come down to gamesmanship, and it is going to come down to that 70 plus 10 fee. And if Chelsea can get a preferable structure on the 70 part, I would expect them to move. So there's a very realistic chance that Caicedo does end up at Chelsea. There's also a realistic chance that Arsenal enter into a two-way race, much like Mikhailo Mudryk, and then we'll have to wait and see who the winner is.
The pride of CBS Sports Golazo, Ben Jacobs, king of the transfer market. Thank you so much for coming on, buddy. We love you.
All the best, guys. Speak soon.
See ya.
Wow, what a stream! What a stream! I'm gonna let you guys finish up, because I do also have to go. What a stream! Thank you to the 136 people tuning in. Make sure you smash the like button, get us to over 100 likes. And Jess, Carlito, thank you for coming on. I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah, Matt, I'm gonna send out the link to a couple of people as well.
That's fine.
Cool.
No worries. Enjoy it.
So Jess, I mean, first things first, your guy, Colwell. I know that you've been very concerned about any concept of keeping him into the deal, and I don't think that's going to be the case, Jess.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's the right move. It's the right move. I wouldn't sell him at all. And even now with the reports of Koulibaly possibly being out the door, then there's absolutely no reason for us to you having Badiashile and Cole as your two choices for left center back. It's perfect, and it's squad planning at its best. And we would be very naive to even entertain letting him go, particularly at the price that they want, right? So we saw the reports of a second bid at 40 million, and that's just ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and look, you rate him higher than I do, but he has a certain skill set that we definitely want, and he's got more poise than Koulibaly, man. And he's got certainly a longer term future, maybe a higher ceiling than a player like Koulibaly. It's certainly better than Trevor Chalobah. So I think Chelsea's playing this one correctly. It is going to be what Ben mentioned, gamesmanship, right? Gamesmanship, and Brighton does it almost better than anybody. They scout well, and then they sell really well, and it's extremely frustrating to have to try and negotiate with them, because they're assholes about it. And I know that you don't ever want us to do business with them again. I think that after this one, we probably won't, because they'll be legitimate competitors now, and maybe we don't want to reinforce them with either players or money. So that's just my contention. But I do have to say that we're going to have to get this one done with Caicedo, and it's got to be without Levi Colwell involved. And guys, a couple things. I sent the link to a couple people. You can join us if you want. We'll be on for a little bit, and then Jess will go and I'll go, and I will, in my mind, celebrate this world-class stream because it was great. This is from Shanath. WorldWideChels question for Jess and Carlito. What is the budget you think player sales and Todd Vault that will be given to attract players to Pochettino? It's entirely indicative on revenue. Yeah, I mean, it's just sales.
I don't think there's a number, particularly because I think we have positions that we're looking at. We had no problem with triggering or Ugarte's release clause, not exactly triggering because it was installments, but paying the price. We've been linked with Caicedo. It is 70 million, 80 million pounds. So I don't think the money itself would be a problem, but I think that we've seen Chelsea in with recent reports not really budge in terms of their valuation. So if I feel like if they think the number is a lot higher than the market value, they might walk away. And that sounds weird because we saw Todd Bowley and Negbali, and we paid for Enzo, who as you might know, is I was a huge fan of that deal, and I was just all the time saying, just pay it, even though if it's not market value, but we needed that at that moment. He's just phenomenal, and we were the only ones that could get him at this point. So I think that was smart, but I don't see us doing that anymore because, as Ben mentioned, maybe Iqbali would get involved in the transfers, but very, very late on. The initial negotiations, the early negotiations, and now are going to be directed by our co-sporting directors. And I just don't think it's about the money that we have to spend, but more about the market value and if the club thinks there's a deal to be made there. So I'm not going to be looking about price being an issue. I would be looking at the positions that we're looking to strengthen.
Alfredo, who do you think we're gonna sign first? We'll just go around the room.
No worries. Well, it's nice to see you guys. First of all, I think Caicedo. To be honest, it just look he's been the one that I've seen us link with the most so far. I've just been seeing his name constantly, so it seems like we are prioritizing him the most at the moment. So I think we'll be looking to get that one done first, I think.
How about you, Jess?
I'm not sure. Because we're in talks with Inter, I'm going to say maybe Onana, if we can get a deal there with the goalkeeper, maybe him. Because I think based on what Ben said, that Moises Caicedo might drag on a little bit. I think we're waiting for Arsenal to wrap up the deal for Declan Rice, maybe to then go to Brighton and say, hey, we are the only ones that can pay for Caicedo or whatever. I'm not sure what the strategy is, but because of that, maybe the goalkeeper, unless of course they want too much money for him and we feel he's not worth that. But because they have a lot of interest in Koulibaly and Lukaku, I think a deal can be done there. So yeah.
I'm going to go a little bit out of the box, and I'm going to say Dusan Vlahovic. I think Vlahovic is going to be the first player that we sign. I think striker, D-mid, goalkeeper, and in that order, because I think goalkeepers are the least important players in the sport.
It's not also about the importance. It's about the availability of the players in that moment. Yeah. Right now, Onana would be, in my view, the one that would be easier compared to it would be easier to get compared to the others. Not saying it would be easy because they want an important fee for him, but because we're pretty much like alone in the transfer. Anyway, I have to mention this because this is crazy. I just got a report. No, it's not Chelsea, but it's worth mentioning because it's a midfielder. But on the Telegraph, that Newcastle are trying to get Nicola Barella from
oh shit
from Inter. So
that is a really, really good player.
Yes, I know. I'm a huge fan. So that's weird. So yeah,
50 million pounds. Telefootball. Eddie Howe wants the club to sign James Maddison and Nicola Barella. Wow, they are speaking softly and carrying a big stick, huh? Jeez. Those are shrewd, very smart moves that are not terribly economically disadvantaging. Those are smart moves, man. Woof. Now I'm a little concerned, Jessica. Now I'm a little concerned. Not just about this window, but competing. If we're going to be losing all these players, Kai to Arsenal, I mean that's not making us better. That's making Arsenal better. That's making us worse. People can say all they want that Kai Havertz is a shit player, which he's not, and he doesn't fit at Chelsea. Okay, if he goes to Arsenal, where there's a bunch of players that would play around him, if he played like attacking mid with Martin Odegaard with two ACNs, one D mid, and he would excel there, and it would make them better. And I feel like these moves, I think we need to be very careful about who we sell to. And that includes Brighton, that includes United, that includes Arsenal, that includes anybody. I mean, the first priority for me of any sales would be to make them go to other leagues. I wouldn't want to strengthen a rival. Who wants to be friends domestically? I don't want to be friends with these teams. Okay, I want to be friends with teams that I don't have to play every month. So that's how I feel. I mean, am I off on this? I don't know. I'm a little worried about the Havertz one.
My thing is that if we, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, if we do what we have to do as a team, then it doesn't matter how much anyone else gets strengthened. We do our own thing. We don't have to worry about everyone else. So I'm not so concerned about that. I just hope that we can get to a level that where we should be at, because like you said before, it's going to get a lot more difficult now with everybody else competing. It's not like it was before where it was just us and Manchester United for a while, or Manchester United and Liverpool. Now there's so many teams that could potentially challenge for the league title every season. It's going to be crazy, my friends. It's going to be absolutely crazy.
Well, there's going to be a lot of tit for tat with Inter. Onana. You got Lukaku. I mean, they even threw Dumfries in there. You can forget it. We're not buying Denzel Dumfries. He's garbage. Eres basura. I mean, but there's a couple other players. I mean, I know they're interested in Koulibaly, Mendy, Chalobah. All fine. Maybe even Pulisic. That's fine. But
Ruben Loftus-Cheek as well.
Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Very interesting that as soon as Maldini was fired, that interest went away. That seems like it was more of a Maldini.
Oh no, sorry.
Interest.
I thought you meant for Inter.
No. You're right. That it switched over to Inter. No. You're right about that. It's just interesting that with Milan, out goes Maldini, out goes their interest in our players. So now it's just switched to Inter. Rather incestuous considering they share a stadium. But So that's interesting. There'll be a huge summons with Inter, and I don't know. The Onana deal, I think, Jess, you had said, do you think Onana's going to be that? That's probably a good guess. He's a very good player. Everybody, if they haven't seen him before, they got to see him in the final, and he's wonderful. So, go ahead, Alfred.
Just quickly on that final, I feel extremely sorry for Inter Milan. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Oh, yeah. Lukaku is actively playing against them. American publications, American blogs don't often blog about, international football. But there's a couple blogs that blogged about Lukaku's performance, with titles like Lukaku was so bad that he was actively playing against his own team in the biggest club competition in the world. I mean, it's just we got to get rid of that guy. And hopefully we can do it with finesse.
Oh, he's gone.
Ourselves from the demons. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, look, I've been at times, that kind of guy that's been saying, let's give him another chance. But after that final, and then remembering how he was in the game, I can't remember who eliminated Belgium, but in that game in the World Cup, when they were eliminated, he missed a bunch of absolute sitters there too. I remember one very, very clear one where I'm pretty sure there was no goalkeeper, and he was right in front of the goal and he still smashed it over. Well, it was something crazy like that. And now that game and now this Inter final, I don't know, man. Don't know if I want him back anymore.
Jess, how do you feel about Mason Mount leaving? Puts you on the spot.
I mean, I'm a huge fan. I think he's overhyped by some and undervalued by others. I think he's a really good player, important. I would have him in the squad 100%. I think he's incredibly valuable. I think if you sell him and you want to replace him, it would be to get a player of his quality, it would require a lot more money than what you get him for. Having said that, oh, come on.
I think we know which camp she's in, man. No. I think we know.
No, I'm openly a fan. I have no problem, but I always, always Chelsea above everything else, about anyone else. So, it is what it is. if he moves on, then he becomes a rival. It's simple as that.
No, it's fair enough. It's fair enough. No, I mean, everybody knows where I stand. He's an average player. Hopefully we get more than an average price for him. I don't care either way. He's vanilla ice cream. He's vanilla
I'm sorry,
ice
just
cream.
news from the meeting with Inter now. Inter asked for Kalidou Koulibaly on loan, and Chelsea said no. So no loans for Inter for Koulibaly. From DiMarzio and Nathan, a good friend of mine.
Nathan, yeah, your guy.
Yeah, and so I mean, he also has offers from Saudi Arabia, I think, and also Bayern has an interest in Kalidou, so we have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, the Saudis are coming for everyone, aren't they?
Yeah, seriously. I don't think this has anything to do with us not wanting to do business with Inter. I think this is just we don't want another loan. Because
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Means, that means we could be eating his over 300K salary or splitting it. I think this is more along the lines of Chelsea want to cut bait, clean the wage scale, start with players that are cheap now, maybe expensive later in terms of wages and incentives and escalators. But no, I think Chelsea's making a move here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like they're gonna get Romelu Lukaku on loan again. I think that's gonna happen. So it wouldn't make sense for us to send two players, older players with really high wages, on loan to a club that doesn't have a lot of money, and so we'll probably have to pay their wages partially. So maybe we're gonna have to take a loss on Lukaku, whatever happens anyway. But I think we're gonna, because Kalidou Koulibaly has other suitors, we're gonna try to possibly sell him elsewhere.
Yeah. So here's the DiMarzio, who is very good. Chelsea told Inter in the first meeting today that they would rather sell Lukaku and Koulibaly than loan them by virtue of DiMarzio. Very good. I love this approach. I also love the approach of using assets that we have to bring the price down of players we want to have. I'm tired of just straight cash offers because eventually that cash piles up. It looks bad on the self-assessment and it looks bad on the balance sheet.
Yeah, I completely agree. If we got players that we can use them. Especially if they're gonna just be at the club, either not wanting to be there or not being used. If we got players that we can involve in deals, I completely agree. Got to do it.
All right, let's see here. What else? I mean, this is so interesting. Alfred, did you get to see that Ben had to break news while he was streaming with us?
Fantastic. Yeah, loved it.
All right, so what, Joe? I need your opinion on this one right here. Chelsea revives Amadou Onana's track. They resumed discussions and showed strong interest. Player open from departure from Everton, who's in urgent need of cash. 55 million. I don't know about that one.
I can't see it. I can't see it happening. That's just me. I'm skeptical. When I read reports, I try to break down, because that's one thing, and it's why we were talking to Ben so much about who does the negotiating, about the FFP, about the need to sell, because journalists, they use catchphrases sometimes, especially with transfers for clicks, and you have also agents doing the briefings and clubs doing the briefings. So you kind of have to know how to read a report in certain terms, and that's something that you continuously grow and learn to do with each passing window. And again, I'm just too skeptical. I can't see us paying that amount for him.
Yeah, and especially the other thing is that I'm not going to allow a team with no real leverage, in dire need of financial assistance and capital injections, to say, oh yeah, so we want 55 mil for a $35 million player. No, we're not subsidizing your bad financial behavior. Okay, we'll pay you maybe even less than what he's worth. And if you don't like it, then you won't get any money and you'll be stuck with the player. So I think we need to be a lot more shrewd. I think we need to be a lot more calculated in how we're doing these deals. And even if that means waiting, then we wait, because everyone, these last two windows, everybody's sort of been so satisfied that they're oversatisfied, that they've been overfed with these ridiculous transfer fees and all these buys and how quickly we moved in the market. We forgot to realize that Chelsea in the past has never moved so expediently and almost so recklessly. So I would like to see the flip side of that coin and maybe be a little bit more shrewd, maybe be a little bit more patient with the way that we buy these players, because it is a long summer. And I've already seen the other side of the coin with this one. Shout out Ms. Rahman. And I don't want that this time around. I just don't want that. I don't want hasty moves. I don't want Marco Correa for 70 million euros. Okay. I don't want Dacho Fofana for no reason at all. Okay. I don't want these stupid moves. Okay. I want us to be smart about this shit. And if we're going to spend money, then be absolutely damn sure, because you know who's been doing that a lot recently? Newcastle and Arsenal. And it seems to be working for them, as opposed to us. We're buying all these players. Now, I love Madueke, I love Mudryk. I'm not going to say those were bad buys. Those were really good buys because they're very young and they're going to be very good for a very long time. But other buys, depreciating asset like Koulibaly, it's a bad move. Okay? Dacho Fofana, it was a bad move. Marco Correa, it was a really bad move. If you really wanted a backup, just go with Ian Maatsen. He's very good. You know, it's so, yeah, Chelsea, don't be hasty. Okay, you've been sitting on the Nkunku thing for a while. You scouted him for a long time. That's not a hasty move. You've been scouting Andre Santos for a while. That's not a hasty move. Plus, he's going to be a $60 million player in 3 years. He's unbelievable. Jess loves him. And so just don't be hasty about this shit, because you don't have to be. Okay, we've already experienced the worst season in the history of this club when you look at money, assets, expectations, talent, manager, everything. So worse than the history of this club. So we've already experienced the worst. We can only go up from here. Don't have to rush it. Don't be hasty. Please don't fuck this up, because I can't have another season like that.
Absolutely not. And you perfectly said, you know, we can't muck around anymore. Everything that we do now, we have to get it right, because we got to get back to the Chelsea that we all know and love. If we, God forbid, we should have another season like we just had. I don't see it. I certainly hope we don't, but we need to do absolutely everything to make sure that we don't get anything close to that kind of season. So Chelsea, do your thing and do it well, please.
Just a question. I think it was Waldo. I think that's your name. Sorry. We haven't sold Ian Maatsen yet. He came back. He came back from Burnley. They want to buy him. There were a couple of reports that Chelsea want at least £20 million for him. There were other reports that Pop wants to look at him during preseason. So he's one to watch. I mean, either he stays with us, because it's complicated, right? Because we did buy Marco Correa. So you have 3 players there. So either
four.
Yeah. So he might, I don't know. I think I think he will only go on loan again if he extends, because otherwise he will come back with only 1 year left on his deal. So we have to see if we extend and send him on loan, if he stays after preseason, or if the club decides to sell him. But nothing was done yet.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? Because we have 4 left backs, wing back, outside back, whatever you want to call it. Poach is probably going to play some variation of a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, 4-1, 4-1, whatever. It's 3 center mids, 3 forwards, 4 defenders. What do you think is going to happen at the left back position? I'll just start with you. Go ahead, Jess, and then Alfred.
What I would want to happen, I would want him to stay. I think he would be our second best option.
Okay.
But I have a little bit of hope that he will extend and go out on loan. But what I expected to happen is I expect us to sell him.
Okay, here we go. This is from Pice, the best aggregator Chelsea has, also a friend of mine. Havertz is now for sale, and he will not be extending his contract. Oh boy.
Wow.
Yeah, he has said he is not here to stay. Florian Plettenberg, Sky reporter, he's from Germany. He's okay, but we'll see. I mean, it's a German player, right? And he's currently with his, or just current stay with his national team. So that's alarming. I don't know, man. That lessens our position. That weakens our bargaining point. You know, when stuff like Kai wants to leave, Kai won't extend his contract. I mean, is there any way we could just tell these players to shut up until we get these deals done? I mean, we're going to do this deal for you. Why are you trying to ruin this? I don't know, Alfred.
Look, I kind of expected it to happen, but I honestly thought that he would end up staying. But you know, just the way things have been for him recently, or for the club in general, it was always possible. I actually thought that Tuchel was gonna try to come in for him personally. I got that one wrong, but yeah. Look, he's not a terrible player. Obviously, we've seen glimpses of him doing some very, very good things, but it just hasn't worked out for him. Yeah, you know, for whatever reason, he's just found it difficult, you know. And in my opinion, I think that he should consider his future and try a new challenge elsewhere. Because, I mean, how long can he keep staying here without it being too fruitful for him? You know, he's got to think about his career. So I don't really blame him, I guess.
Jessica, what do you think about Andre? You think he'll be given a shot?
Yeah, I do. I think he will be looked at in preseason. But I also think it depends on the incomings. Obviously, now we're seeing a lot of people, a lot of players potentially leave, right? So if all of them leave, like if you say Kova, obviously now Kai, even though he plays as a forward for us, but anyway, so you have Ngolo going to Saudi, you have Mason Mount potentially leaving. Connor, we don't even know what's going on there yet. Ruben Loftus-Cheek will probably leave as well. So you have a lot of space, a lot of room for players. So I'm expecting Poch to look at the likes of Andre, Caicedo, and Chukwuemeka in the preseason. I think at least one of them will leave on loan because we only have the cup competition. Obviously, we don't have Europe, so they are three very young players that are going to need minutes. Not to mention Lewis Hall as well, who ideally likes to, is a midfielder and likes to play in midfield. But I am expecting Poch to look at them in preseason, and then he will make them the best choice for their development. That's the most important thing, is that we don't keep players with us and then don't play them, because we saw that with Chukwuemeka this past season, and we saw a little glimpse of him, but for his development, it ended up being the wrong move, because he barely played, even though he has a lot of quality. So whoever stays needs to be afforded the minutes. So I'm just counting on Poch to analyze all of that and all the circumstances.
Where's he going to play?
Andre and the pivot. Because
D mid.
Yeah, he can play DM. He can be a 6. He has played that role before in the national team as well. But then because Mahlon, okay, so if you're looking at the South American tournament, we have a player called Mahlon, and Mahlon got injured during that. So because of that, Andre had to play the seating DM. So he can play that. He is wonderful at that. But it's not his ideal position, because he is very good going forward. So I'm not going to compare him to the Bison Essien. I'm not saying he is at that level, but just in terms of characteristics, what he likes to do on the pitch, he is very much like him. So he's very, very solid defensive, but you have to allow him to go forward. So he can do both. He can be a seating DM. He can be in the pivot playing a little bit more defensive, but also allowing him to go forward as that surprise element.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw him play in the pivot a couple of times. I mean, he would do what Andre Pirlo would do, sit right in front of the center backs, and even on goal kicks, he would check right to the top of the 18, receive the ball, turn, and then go. That's a facilitating position. I played that position in college. It's one where you receive the ball a lot. There's a restrictive element to the position, though. If you're playing in the pivot, if you're playing D mid, you would need one of your other two center mids to step in and cover you if you go forward. So maybe that's something that he'll have to learn. He'll have to be more diligent and more conservative. But I'm happy to hear that he can play that position, because I've heard a variety of different things. But I'd rather hear it from someone who is Brazilian, who actually watches Brazil, instead of just watching YouTube highlights and news on your Chelsea Twitter timeline, because she's an actual fan. She's not a pretender. And that's why I always go to Jess for South American players. Thank you, Jessica.
No problem. He is, it's the thing with young players, right? So sometimes people put a lot of expectations that are just crazy, thinking that he's going to come in and he's ready for the Premier League to be one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. So, he is a young player and he is moving countries. He never played outside of Brazil before. So you have to know about his development, but he has the tools to make it. He has the quality to make it. He is highly regarded within the national team, with the pundits in Brazil. And yes, he has the tools to play in a number of positions in midfield. But yeah, I would compare him in terms of characteristics, ideal characteristics, to Essien, because he's not a player that you want to restrict if you don't have to. So if he can play that defensive role to allow Enzo to go forward, 100%. But again, it's just stressing it. Allow these players to develop. They're not ready-made. You're making the players.
Yeah, it's called coaching. It's called coaching, not just managing, but actually coaching the player, the way that Maurizio Sarri did when he first went to Napoli. He coached those players and taught them how to play his ball. So, Maurizio Pochettino, who is a developer, he's not just a guy that wants to buy 29 to 33-year-old players and create a ready-made team immediately. Pochettino could teach the craft. He was a player, a relatively good one, actually, a good player, but he's a developer as well. So it's a coach, not just a manager. And so that future looks bright for him and guys like Carney. I don't know if Caicedo is going to stay at Chelsea for now. I think that he might go on loan again, but I certainly think Andre will be given an opportunity. I've seen some of him. I think he's great. I like the defensive midfield position for him, as long as he has cover when he goes forward, because he's so good on the ball, and you have to be. But the other thing about it is that he's also very athletic. You look at someone like Pirlo, you look at someone like Jorginho, you look at someone like Busquets. They are traditional holding midfielders, the guys that sit in front of the center back. They receive the ball 80 times a game, right? All three of those players lacked athleticism, and they were such a liability defensively, especially Busquets when he got older. The other two, their entire career, very slow. Andre's not slow. And one of the characteristics that I like about defensive midfielders is speed, because it's a transition position. It's one, especially when your team loses the ball, you need to be transitioning quickly on defense to help cover. And if you lack that, the way that Jorginho did in his last couple of seasons with Chelsea, your center backs are on an island, and that is a problem. So the fact that Santos is a very athletic player, same way that Ugarte was an athletic player, but he didn't end up working out, that actually appeals to me as well. Just something as primitive and elementary as speed. It's actually a very important aspect of the position.
One thing, I have to go, but before I go quickly, one thing that I think, if given the chance, Chelsea fans will really like him is, and it's one aspect of, because he played for Vasco, and it's one aspect where he fights for the badge. He's that sort of player that will give everything, that will celebrate every tackle, that really tries to develop a relationship with the fans, and knows who he is playing for. So I think that's really important. He has that mentality to connect with the fans, to connect with the club, to embrace what the club is about. So he's just that, he has that leadership ability within him. And I think we've lacked that. and that particular aspect, I think it's going to be very important. Can be very important if he stays, and if it works for us, is definitely a plus. Where you see a player really like Thiago did, when you kiss the badge, but you mean it. That really. Call it passion merchant or whatever you want, but it's important and it feels good to know that you have players that are gonna fight for your club. And he is definitely that mode of player that he buys into the club, and I think he's gonna do that with us as well.
Great. Well, Alfred, Jess, Matt, and obviously Ben Jacobs. Wonderful stream. She hit it right on the nail. Alfred, I do have to go as well. So, buddy, thanks for coming on as well. But look, we'll leave it at this. Want to have Ben Jacobs on during transfer windows. He's wonderful. So is Jess. And we enjoyed today, obviously. It was a very, very, very good, hour and 40 minutes, hour and a half. And, we'll be back on the rest of this week. We'll do the barbecue on Friday night with me and Jared. But, subscribe. WorldWideChels, all that shit that other YouTubers say. I don't know. I'm not really a YouTuber. All right. See you guys, and thank you for tuning in. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Bye,
See
guys.
ya.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you, everyone.